Jeremy Clarkson is waiting on a council decision right now. Not for a new building, not for an expansion, for a patch of gravel his own customers are already using, because without it, they park on a country lane and someone eventually gets hurt. That should be a straightforward conversation. It has taken 3 separate applications, a formal 2-day hearing, 2 inspector site visits, and the better part of 3 years to get this far. And it still isn't finished. Here's the thing. The paperwork trail behind this. Single car park tells you almost everything you need to know about what it actually costs to run a farm business in England in 2025. Diddly Squat sits inside the Cotswolds area of outstanding natural beauty. That designation doesn't sound like much until you understand what it means in practice. Every fence post, every gravel patch, every basic facility request has to clear planning restrictions tougher than almost any other farm in England faces. Not because the land is dangerous, because it is beautiful. Keep that in mind. It explains nearly everything that follows. Go back to 2021. Clarkson applies for permission to open a restaurant near the farm shop. The council refuses it. Most people at that point would have accepted the answer and moved on. Clarkson didn't move on, but he didn't ignore the process either. In August 2022, he opens a 40-cover restaurant inside a building called the Lambing Barn using permitted development rights. That is not a loophole. It is a legal mechanism available to any landowner in the country trying to bring a disused agricultural building back into productive use. He wasn't hiding it. He confirmed it in writing himself. 12 days into that opening, the council served an enforcement notice. The restaurant closed inside a month. Think about what that actually cost. Not in some abstract business sense. In Clarkson's own words, he had to sell most of the cows he'd bought. He went back to using the chemical inputs he'd specifically been trying to move away from. A supply chain built around a beef-based menu collapsed overnight. His words on the record, "I no longer wish to open a restaurant." That is not the statement of a man who got bored. That is a man who watched something he'd built get dismantled before it had the chance to prove itself, and decided the fight wasn't worth the cost. You have probably felt a version of that. You build something. You do it properly. You follow the rules you're told to follow. And then a decision made in a room you weren't in takes it apart anyway. You know exactly what that sentence cost him to write. By January 2023, Clarkson puts his position on record in a letter to the council. He isn't asking for anything new. He is explicitly saying he doesn't want to expand. His words, "We do not wish to expand the on-site businesses any further. We are perfectly happy with what we have. I do not want to turn Diddly Squat Farm into Disneyland. It is, after all, where I live. But we really do need on-site parking." Read that closely. He is not lobbying for an empire. He is asking to stop his own visitors parking on a country lane outside his front gate. He appealed the restaurant enforcement notice and the car park refusal simultaneously. That is not a contradiction. That is a man who had tried to accept a bad outcome quietly, watched what it actually cost him, and decided his livelihood was worth defending. Any farmer looking at the same numbers would have made exactly the same call. The appeal runs across 2 days in March 2023. Planning Inspector R.J. Perrin visits the site twice, not once, twice, before ruling. And here is where it splits. On the restaurant, Perrin sides against Clarkson. 6 weeks to restore the land. His exact words, 6 weeks is more than sufficient to restore the surrounding land to the condition it was in before the breach took place. 6 weeks for a business that employed local people, that sold local produce, in an industry that cannot survive on subsidies and unpredictable weather alone. On the car park, the one thing that was purely about keeping visitors off a country road, Perrin grants it. He approves the extension. He formalises the temporary parking. He permits new access arrangements and a small cafe attached to the lambing shed alongside it. Even the inspector who ruled against Clarkson on the restaurant could see the parking was never the problem. It was the solution. That permission runs 3 years from June 2023, which brings the clock out to around 2026. Clarkson is not asking for anything new right now. He is asking the council not to switch a working solution off. But here is the part that should make you genuinely uncomfortable. Because this is not the first time. Before the 2023 ruling even landed, there was already an earlier application, February 2023, for a temporary car park running until January 2025. 70 cars, 4 rows, a 60 by 32 meter field. Then the inspector's ruling created a different 3-year window. Now, in 2026, Clarkson is back asking for permission through to 2030. 3 separate applications. Same patch of gravel, same purpose. A facility that Oxfordshire's own Highways Authority formally confirmed prevents dangerous parking on the adjacent road. That is not Clarkson prolonging a dispute. That is a planning system that cannot commit to a decision longer than a few years at a time, forcing a Working farmer to rebuild the same case from scratch again and again for something that was never seriously controversial to begin with. And here is the irony the council cannot escape, because they said it themselves. In 2023, West Oxfordshire District Council went on record acknowledging that the planning process shown in Season 2 of the show can seem obstructive, not might seem, can seem their word. They followed it with the standard assurance that they treat Diddly Squat Farm no differently from anyone else. Then, in 2024, they went further. They stated publicly that they had encouraged Diddly Squat Farm to make a car park application long before the appeal even started. Read that sentence again slowly. The council is on record confirming they told him a car park was the right call, and it still required a formal inspector, a 2-day hearing and 2 site visits to actually approve it. The council spent ratepayer time and money processing a planning battle against a solution they had already privately endorsed. That is not bureaucratic caution. That is a system eating itself. Not everyone in the village agrees with Clarkson, and this is not a channel that pretends otherwise. One resident, after the restaurant closed, called it a win for the community, said the farm was in the wrong place. That is a real voice and it deserves to be heard honestly, but set it against a highways authority that has formally endorsed the parking. A local councillor who went on record calling for planning rules to change to support farm diversification. And a council whose own public statements keep arriving at conclusions that contradict their own process. Liam Walker, county councillor, on the record, local councils need to understand that farming has significantly changed, and the planning rules need to change too, to allow farmers to diversify quickly. Farmers across the country deserve support. That is not a fringe position. That is an elected official reading the same paperwork and reaching the conclusion the evidence actually points to. But the most decisive voice in this entire file is not West Oxfordshire District Council at all. It is a completely different authority, and the contrast is stark. Oxfordshire County Council. The people whose actual job is roads. Their transport lead, Oliver Eden, did not hedge. He confirmed in writing that the additional car parking is an important facility that accommodates demand which would otherwise likely cause disruption and safety concerns on the adjacent highway. And then he went further. Oxfordshire County Council, he stated, supports the extension of the temporary permission to align with the expected ongoing demand associated with the television series schedule. The authority responsible for road safety is telling the planning authority to stop delaying and match the permission to reality. The farm draws crowds. The crowds need somewhere to go. Pretending otherwise just moves the risk back onto a country lane where someone eventually gets hurt. Clarkson's own submission makes one more point that rarely gets mentioned. When Diddly Squat's car park works, it isn't only Diddly Squat that benefits. Other local farms and suppliers depend on the foot traffic that arrangement supports. This is not one celebrity's convenience. This is a supply chain. So where does this leave things? The 2030 application is sitting with West Oxfordshire District Council. No date given for a ruling. But look at what is actually in front of them. A highways authority that has already said yes. A business that has been transparent about exactly how long it needs the permission and precisely why. A 3-year track record demonstrating the car park does exactly what it was designed to do. Keeps cars off the road and keeps a working farm's visitors safe. There is no real case left to make against it. There is just a council that has, by its own admission on multiple occasions, made this harder than it needed to be. Watch for that decision. If it lands the way the evidence points, it will not be a victory handed to Clarkson. It will just be the council finally catching up to what the highways authority, the local councillor and West Oxfordshire's own past statements already agreed on some time ago. Tell us in the comments which thread you want us to pull next. The Hawkstone numbers, the pub's performance in year 2. Or we come straight back here the moment West Oxfordshire finally makes up its mind.